How's it going, everybody? We are back with another edition of the Ad Podcast after a short summer siesta period. I have a really exciting guest that I am excited to introduce you all today. Tripp Westbrook is the Chief Creative Officer and President of the Firehouse agency based in Dallas, Texas. He's been recognized by almost every major award show in the industry. But one of the main claims to fame that he has is a USA Top 100 Super Bowl commercial of all time. Tripp, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm excited to hash it up with you today.
Thanks, Dylan. Happy to be here. I know that summers are always difficult to navigate when it comes to, making time, but I appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Yeah, my pleasure. Well, I know you and I were just talking a little bit off camera. I just got back from a 10-day road trip where I spent some time in the RV, went through Yosemite, spent 5 days in Tahoe with a former client, and then surfed my way back down the Central Coast, stopping in Rockaway Beach and Capitola. And as much as I love summer for, the recreation and being able to take some time off, it definitely got me fully recharged to get back into the office and sink into some projects, and most importantly, get the show back up and humming. So you're the first guest after the vacation period.
Yeah, I just got back from a week or 10 days in the Southeast. So we were down in Savannah and Hilton Head and Charleston. And yeah, that's what we do. We like to get in the car and take a long drive. And those things always have a way of, giving you a bit of perspective and time to think, which is always great.
Yeah, totally. I've done that trip too. That was a couple of years ago. I went from San Diego all the way out to Florida, and then we made it as far north as Charleston.
Okay.
My plan was to make it all the way to Maine, but I had just finished brokering a sponsorship of the World Surf League for Adobe. And they told me if I could get back to the other side of the country, if I could get to the Kelly Slater wave pool in 5 days, I could surf on Sponsors Day for that mechanized wave that Kelly Slater built in the middle of cattle country up in Lamar.
That's got to be way more fun than going to Maine. Nothing against Maine. Maine's beautiful, but man, getting to do that with Kelly Slater is awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty fun. Well, hey, we could hash up our summers all show. I would imagine it would be pretty interesting, but you've got a wealth of knowledge and expertise that I'm really excited to showcase for the audience today. So Tripp, would you do me the favor of walking me through your background a little bit? You've got a pretty storied history within the agency world before you came over to Firehouse and have spent a good chunk of your career. But do you want to maybe talk to the audience a little bit about some of the formative moments in your career as you
sure.
kind of got into the creative and advertising world?
Yeah, so I grew up in Virginia, and I was actually my dad was in the business, and he was a creative director as well. So that's always kind of a good starting point. But went to school at Virginia Tech, studied broadcast, and at the end of the day, got out. Didn't go the traditional ad school route, and instead spent some time pulling a book together and managed to get an internship at the Martin Agency. Which, what a great place to start your career. Super formative, worked on a lot of big brands, and that agency at the time was going through a big growth mode as well. So did that for a while, and then got recruited to go out to San Francisco, went to Hal Riney and Partners, worked on a lot of the early Saturn work, which was certainly formative for me. Left there, went and helped open the New York office of Fallon McElligott at the time. So that was super exciting. I always said, I don't want to work in New York. And then I'm like, yeah, if you get a chance, go work in New York. It's it really tests your mettle and pushes you. And then after that point, my wife and I were about to have our second child. So raising them in New York seemed rather expensive at the time. So I got a call from GSD&M down in Austin, went down there to be a creative director. And so that was those are sort of the big hits from an agency standpoint. I freelanced for a while, did some new business stuff for a while in terms of strategizing that. And then, but I knew at the end of the day that I wanted to have a large role at maybe a smaller agency, and got a call from the original owner of Firehouse and asked me to come in and help that agency begin to transform itself from more of a promotions agency to become a creative boutique. And that's sort of the story. And then my current business partner and CEO of the agency, Steve Smith, was already at the agency at that time. And in 2019, I came out in 2007, and then in 2019, at the end of 2019, he and I bought out the agency. So great timing, because COVID hit right after that. But nothing sort of tests your values and your belief system and what you're all about, like jumping right into the fire of COVID.
Yeah, I feel like COVID was a great stress tester for many different business models and industries. And yeah, I think most of us probably ended up on better footing. I think, there's some obvious industries that were impacted more than others. But I think the main thing that I took away from COVID is, we don't have to chain people to desks. We can be productive. But then there's also something that you lose from culture and community of being, lockstep and in a room together and sticking Post-it notes on a wall. I'd love to hear your perspective on how you guys have navigated post-COVID and the whole debate about, work from home or being in person and all that good stuff.
Well, I mean, like you say, there's a certain spontaneity and creativity and, keeping up with what's going on out in the world and talking about it, around offices and things like that kind of went away from us.
Mm-hmm.
I think for us at the agency, and Steve and I, our first inclination was to say, okay, what can we do as a company to get through this? What can we do to be sharper, be smarter, be better? And we took a lot of time during COVID. Unfortunately, we had some downtime to really do what we tell all our clients that we do, which is, hey, figure out who you are, what you want to be, and how you're going to get there, and really turn that lens on yourselves. And we did that, and it actually was pretty transformative for us. It affected everything from the types of offerings that we have as a company, all the way down to how we engage with our employees and everything in between. So that discipline and taking the time to do that discipline was really, really great for us. And then from an employee standpoint, as we work through this, I think the only thing we could do was listen and ask our folks, what do you need? What works for you throughout all of this? And listening, being empathetic as well as sympathetic to what was going on out in the world, being less rigid maybe than the way things were back in the day with regards to sitting at your desk or timelines or, all that. It was really important for us to spend that time and let people know that we really do care. We really do want you to be here in terms of mentally and emotionally, and that we were going to do whatever we could to basically keep the band together.
Yeah, that's cool. I've seen when I was watching some of your videos today on X, you talked a little bit about, you guys being an extremely nimble, top-heavy organization where, you've got the creative firepower and the strategy and kind of the, let's call it the deep work group of people, that are core to the agency. But then you've got the getting stuff done, which can be spun up based on projects, new accounts, new business, et cetera, that maybe is a more flexible employee base that you can tap into for freelancers and gig economy folks and stuff like that. Do you want to maybe touch a little bit on how you've created this agency structure that maybe ties a little bit into some of the things we were exploring around, how do you keep your best people? And
sure thing. It's interesting that, the way that the business is shifting and the way that creativity is shifting is that so much of what used to be valued, I think, by clients is now commoditized.
Mm,
All the hands work, whether it's AI that's jumping in or whether it's just lower cost alternatives, the thinking in this business has become much more valuable in terms of, and frankly harder to find.
hmm.
That's where the experience comes in. And so as we thought about how do we set ourselves up for success and how do we scale when we need to, knowing that so much of our business now is either project work or comes and goes depending on you know CMO tenure. We decided, well, let's keep the intellectual capital within the organization, and then if we need to, we can hire freelancers. We've got great networks and they're great remote and freelance people out there. Let's tap into those networks. And so when we need to, we're able to scale up really, really quickly because of our relationships. And then when those projects wind down, we can scale it back down again. But we know, and our clients know, that at the top level, the people that are really guiding the brands either strategically, creatively, from an account service standpoint, you know, all of those people kind of stay in the boat with us as the relationships continue. So it's really been helpful for us, particularly as a 30 something plus person shop, to be able to say, okay, yeah, we're going to carry maybe a little bit higher level of person, maybe a little bit more overhead, but that's going to allow us to flex as we need to, depending on the size of the project and the client that comes in the door.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it also addresses another pain point that I hear from a lot of CMOs when they do the show, when they talk about the idea of auditioning or RFPing agencies. One of the big frustrations is they'll get the business development team, a lot of SVP titles and the creative
Right.
directors that have won awards. And then as soon as the business gets signed, then they're, kind of their team is re-engineered, and some of those people that had the pedigree or the personality or the creative chops that they fell in love with during the pitch process, they are no longer to be seen. And,
Absolutely.
I don't want to denigrate having a younger junior account team, but it happens more often than not.
Sure.
So I imagine having a senior leadership team that's a little bit more top heavy and does some of the day-to-day execution probably alleviates some of that concerns that client might have of the quote unquote bait and switch.
It does. I mean, we still get asked the question all the time. I mean, is this the team that's going to be working on my business? And we're fully transparent, and we tell them, yes, it is. Um, we don't necessarily go in with a slick new business team all the time, but it's a balance, right? Because you can't always have the top level people doing everything from top to bottom on an account. And frankly, you also have to create a path for people to grow into, for younger people to grow into and gain that experience.
Yeah.
So it's really about a blending of the two. And we work with clients and say, look, you're going to have senior experienced people that are leading the business. You'll know them, you'll hear from them on a daily basis, but you're also going to have some younger people who have an opinion and have a voice and have a different experience that they bring to the table too. So it's really that blending of skill sets, blending of experience, and making sure that we're better as a unit as opposed to relying on one person in particular.
Yeah, I like that. I'd like to go back to something you talked about that I would think that would be interesting to the audience. There's a lot of people that watch the show that are wanting to break into the advertising industry, or they're young people trying to learn what our business is. And you mentioned the idea that you didn't go to traditional, advertising school. You didn't study that in college, but you were able to build a book of business, or build a book rather, and a resume and a portfolio. Um, I'm guessing that was probably you putting together spec work and maybe
Totally.
doing some internship style projects. Can you
I'm sure
talk
it
a
was
little?
terrible at the time.
Well, it reminds me of I just rewatched Mad Men recently, and it reminds me of when Don Draper was pitching Roger Sterling when he came in and bought a fur coat for his mistress, and he had a book
Yeah.
of business ready to go. Bad example of the circumstances, but I think to some degree, advertising, especially at the creative agency level, is one of those industries that are as hard to break into as financial services on Wall Street or the
Yeah.
entertainment industry. So, can you talk a little bit about that experience? Because I think it's important for people to know that you need to be building a resume and a portfolio long before you ever show up for your first day of work.
No question. And I think one of the things that I tell the folks that I hire and that have worked with me is that, you know, certainly as a creative person, you need to have a bit of selfishness and looking out for yourself, as you, whether you're brand new to the business or whether you've been in the business 5 or 8 years. And what I mean by that is you need to always be adding to your portfolio. You need to always be, whether it's things you did in a pitch, if it got sold, awesome. Put the final product in there. If you thought it was a killer idea and it didn't get sold, but you really think it adds to your portfolio, put that in there. Um, when we hire creative people, we want to see how you think, and we want to see what makes you tick and some of your life experience that goes along with that. And I see too many kids coming into the business these days that are very focused on, what am I going to get paid and what are my benefits? And I understand that. I totally understand that. But to me, if you base all of your, position acceptance decisions on that, then you're not looking down the road. Because in my mind, having a great portfolio is the best job insurance you could ever have.
Yeah.
To be able to say, look, I can get a job whenever I want because I've got great work here. And you insulate yourself from being laid off a lot of times, because they'll let go of the people first that don't seem to add the greatest value. You can pick and choose what positions you want. You'll be sought after. You could go freelance. You could go remote. You could do all the things that I think most people would like to do in their jobs, but you have to build that portfolio first and keep it up to date, keep it fresh, because at the end of the day, when you get older in this business, no secret to anyone, unless you get into some of those executive positions, excuse me, you become a little more tenuous with your experience and with, whether agencies will keep you on, because at the end of the day, as much as I hate to say it, agencies tend to look for less expensive talent.
Sure.
And I would argue that I'd much rather take someone who is older and more expensive, who's got a great portfolio and who can crank out a lot of high level work without a lot of oversight. Man, that's got great value for me. So back to the original question, start early, find somebody that you admire in the business, who does what you do. See if that person will kind of mentor you a little bit, or get a couple different mentors and pick their brains and become a student of the business. Understand work that came 5, 10, 15 years ahead of you. Understand why it was great. Look through award show annuals, look through Lurzer's archive, be inspired, not to copy, but to understand the process and understand the thinking that went into it. And if you have a chance, reach out to the people that did that work and say, you're learning. I think the best folks in this business aren't precious about sharing how they do what they do, because they know that the reason they can do what they do is because they just spent the last 5 or 10 years building that credibility. So someone who's at the beginning of the journey, you're just getting started. So, people that know what they're doing, they'll be happy to share their experience with you and how they think and to give you the feedback that you're looking for.
I love that. Did you have any mentors that kind of helped you along the way?
I certainly, I had a few. I had a couple of writers that were ahead of me at the Mart agency that I certainly looked up to. I've had people along the way that either have since passed or have retired that have been great, and not always on the creative side of things. I mean, certainly Pat Fallon was one of those people that, as a as a just as a agency leader and someone who values and ethics and beliefs meant more than anything, and how you treat people. There was a lot to learn about how to defend your work and defend what you do and the decisions you make in a way that has values behind it. So there've been folks across my career that some of them probably don't even know who they were or what they did, but mostly because I wanted to read, I wanted to study, I wanted to listen, I wanted to talk to people, I wanted to attend seminars and just be a sponge of what all's around us. And then you can sort of take what works for you or modify what works for you and start to create your own style and your own voice in the business.
Yeah, I love that. And also, do you have any advice for those who feel like they don't have a mentor and are seeking one? Because that always seems like a bit of a tricky process. You don't want it. You're not going to cold call mentors. But I think you also mentioned something that's interesting is that a lot of times I think people are scared of just asking.
Yeah.
And most of the great creatives are actually very generous people, and they want to give back, and they end up teaching later on in life. I found just through doing this podcast that I've been able to have amazing conversations
Absolutely.
with creatives that I have only ever known about by name, just because I reached out to them and was willing to spend an hour with them, giving them a platform. And a lot of people are very, I would say, very generous with their time around something as simple as coming onto a podcast. So, do you have any recommendations for those that are looking for mentorship?
Yeah, I would say don't be afraid to ask. I mean, we'll just start there. I remember one of the things that and it happens at all levels of your career. So when I started in this job as creative director of the agency, trying to help the owner grow the agency, I wanted to I'd had some exposure to other agency cultures and other places, and some folks in the agency had not. And so we were going to make a trip to New York, and I cold emailed Dave Droga and told him who it was, told him what I was trying to do. And he was generous enough to give us an hour of his time.
Wow, that's cool.
Did the same thing with the guys who started Mother. I knew those guys, but they were still generous enough to offer their time. So first and foremost, don't be afraid to ask, but also understand who you're talking to, do a little homework, understand who you're talking to, what their background is, and why you want to speak to them. And so, I get called and outreach a fair amount, and I'm always happy to help as much as I can. The times where I might get a little put off is when I feel like somebody is calling up just assuming that, hey, because they called, I'm going to help, without really knowing or understanding or appreciating maybe where I'm coming from, or if I have to put them off and say, hey, get back to me in a week or two and I'll be happy to do it. Or, just being understanding, who you're talking to, but then again, don't be afraid to ask and don't be afraid to be persistent. Be nice, be humble, be authentic and be genuine, and you'll find you'll get a lot of help in this business from folks.
Yeah, there's an etiquette to it for sure, and I think
Yeah,
you hit on a big important point of it, which is be accommodating, right? You're asking busy people to take time out of their afternoon or their schedule. So, if you have to reschedule a couple of times, like work around their calendar. Don't take you make it work on your end.
right.
It's not their responsibility to make it work, with your calendar. At least that's my approach.
It's true. I mean, there is a little bit of meeting in the middle
Sure.
with that, but look, I think anybody that and like I said, do your homework on both the agency and who you're going to be wanting to talk to, and figure out why you want them as a mentor. And I think
Mhm.
that's a good place to start. You know, some people say, well, just because you're an agency owner. Well, okay, but what is it about what you've learned about me that appeals to you as someone who wants to get into the business? I mean, I would argue that there are certainly different folks for different mindsets, but that's a better way in to be able to give someone a reason why they want you to mentor them or why they want to pick your brain. Those are always great ways in, and certainly on the recipient side gives us an understanding of, oh, this person really does care. They're going to take any information that you know or any advice we give, and they're going to consider it and think about it and put it to use, as opposed to just checking a box and saying, yeah, I talked to this guy one time or that woman one time, and yeah, it was fine, and just didn't appreciate the opportunities that were presented to them.
Yeah, no, that's good advice. So you touched on another topic which I wanted to address, which is the dynamic of being an agency leader and also wearing your hat as a chief creative officer and someone who's come up through the creative side of the industry. Jason Sperling at InOcean took it upon himself to write a book on this topic because it was so complicated and he was so passionate about it.
Yeah.
And he touches on the idea, and this isn't unique to advertising, but in any creative services industry, uh, you are rewarded for doing great work as a creative by taking the creative stewardship out of your hands and putting you into the position of a manager and
Yes.
a leader of people. And I'm curious how you've navigated that in your own career. You've obviously been very successful at it because you've risen all the way to the president of your current agency. But have you juggled that, as a creative? Has it been hard for you to relinquish control over the pencil, so to speak, and give it to others? And do you enjoy the creative stewardship of the team versus your own work more now? I'd just love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, that is complicated. I think the first thing for me was trying to decide, is this what I want?
Mm,
Um, I don't know. And throughout my career, I think if you ask people that I've worked with, I think they would always say that I had an equal foot in being a creative person, but also being a pretty good presenter and being good with clients, and, being able to hold a conversation and sound reasonably intelligent and all that kind of stuff. And I think that, circling back, I think that led me to say, okay, I wouldn't mind sort of running the show at some point. I
mm,
wouldn't mind stepping up to management and building something. To me, that's the difference. I don't think every creative person either can or wants to run or own something. And I think that is perfectly fine. And I think, to Jason's point before, that, you know, there needs to be a path within the industry that doesn't penalize creative people who don't want to move further away from the work.
yeah, yeah.
So it's an interesting dynamic. It is a path that I wanted to go on. I wanted to build something, and I wanted to be able to take the things that I learned at all the the agencies that I worked at, synthesize it down and be able to create something that took something from each of those. And moving away from the work is challenging, I would say, because there's certainly a part of me that, in any creative, that I like it a certain way. and and I've had to work really hard at letting go of that. At the same time, as chief creative officer, I'm responsible for the output of the entire agency. So, for me, it's about how do I get the most out of the people that are guiding the pieces of business on a day-to-day basis. And I still have to inspire them. I still have to give them the freedom to work and breathe. I still have to mentor them in many ways and help teach them. And, that's a challenging part. The hardest thing for me in the entire process was kind of relearning how to communicate with people that weren't already inside my head. um, Creative people can always be a little eccentric, and maybe, they can come up with great ideas, but maybe aren't the best communicators, or maybe aren't the most empathetic when it comes to other departments in the agency, or take your pick.
Yep.
We actually put our leadership team through a really interesting process where we sort of understood our own personalities and the way that we communicate, and tried to understand sort of how other people communicate, and learn not to misread or to jump to conclusions just because the words that came out of someone's mouth or the body language that they were expressing wasn't exactly what I interpreted them to be, or vice versa. So that was a hugely illuminating process. And I realized that, when communicating, you need to give people some grace, and you need to understand kind of where they're coming from on their side. And as a leader, that has helped me both, laterally, vertically, any way you want to describe it, with regards to making sure that the things I'm trying to communicate are actually heard and understood, and not taken the wrong way.
Yeah. So you guys have spent some time investing in the interpersonal dynamics and the soft skills piece of the corporate culture and management group, in addition to the hard skills.
There are definitely some things that I've had to adjust to, and there are definitely some conversations as an agency owner that I've had that I never ever thought I would be having, but mostly centered around HR stuff. But it's it teaches you. I'm a lot less prone maybe to shoot from the hip, or fire off a few things just because I'm fired up about something. I've had to temper that a little bit, which, to be honest, sometimes I miss, but it's part of the maturation process that I've had to go through.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest takeaway from my 20s to my 40s was just maybe sit on that email for 24 hours and see if it actually needs to be sent. And most
cooling off periods are our friends now.
Yeah, exactly. So you've actually been voted by Ad Age as one of the best places to work, which is a hard distinction to come by, especially in an industry which sometimes doesn't get the best accolades for corporate culture, integration, work-time balance, or work-life balance, all the things. So I'm interested in how you've been deliberate about creating a culture that was so much that you were able to win this high distinction. Would you talk a little bit about some of the intentions that you set from a cultural perspective to earn that accolade?
Yeah, it's interesting because I never thought that we would actually win the number one spot. And
Wow.
We've been on the list the last 3 years in the top 25 or whatever. I think we were as high as 6 at one point, but hitting the number one spot just blew me away because I thought, no way, there's not going to be attainable. There's no secret to it, to be perfectly honest. The secret to it is listen to your folks. Listen to them, and don't listen to them um, in a perfunctory manner. You have to listen to them in a way that lets them know that you hear them, and then you need to take action that validates that. So, look, I look, being a best place to work is not is not all about caving into everybody and just giving everybody what they want. That doesn't fit anybody's business model. Um, but it is about picking and choosing the things that matter to your employees and matter to their quality of life. And if you're genuine about that, then you can take, we poll our people on a pretty regular basis and say, how you doing? And we actually mean that. How are you doing? What would make your life a little easier? We've during COVID, we gave them stipends to help them get their home office set up in a way that worked for them. We ask them, hey, do you want to work full time in the office? Do you want to work full time remote? What do you want? Well, we've got a pretty social group, and so their choice was a hybrid solution. So we are Mondays and Fridays, we work from home remotely, and Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we're in the office, and we utilize that as a lot of collaboration time.
Yeah, I bet.
We listen to, we've got a lot of young people in the business who are getting married, who are having families. We totally overhauled our parental leave policy. We give money towards adoptive parents. It really is. And look, every agency is going to be a little bit different, but it does come down to listening to them, hearing what they need to be successful and feel like they're bringing their best selves to work, and finding ways for the agency to help them achieve that. And yeah, we could probably save a fair amount of money if we just cut all that off. But we really do believe that an agency is only as good as its people. And when we have those folks who are happy when they show up and they're happy when they, are doing their work, what we find is they will go the extra mile both for the agency and for our clients. And our clients see a direct benefit back to the happiness of our folks. And I think we've all worked with people who are miserable in their jobs and couldn't wait to leave and were punching the clock right at 5 o'clock. Well, agencies feel that and clients feel that. So if we're finding ways to mitigate that and finding ways to keep the people that you work with engaged and happy and feeling productive and feeling valued, then they're going to keep coming back and they're going to recommend like-minded people to come work for you. And clients are going to feel that, because when the chips are down and client says, hey, I need you to turn this around in a short amount of time, people know that you're not going to take advantage of them. That, hey, if they do this for you, for us, for the agency, that, hey, we'll find a way to help you on another end. We'll let you take a half day, just to recharge or whatever it is. So, it isn't a secret. I think it's about finding a way to communicate it to the people that you work with, finding a way to share that information and let them ask questions and being transparent. And at the end of the day, just doing what you say you're going to do.
Yeah, being transparent, following through. And I like that idea of, I know one of the things that we worked on in my last agency was, we would do the half day Fridays in the summer and try and really be generous with not just the mandatory holidays. And really the idea was the same as like, hey, like let's take the downswings as an opportunity to have as good of a resemblance of work-life balance that we can, because then when that all-nighter pitch comes in, it's an ebb and flow. It doesn't feel like just
Absolutely.
that constant state of being in a pressure cooker, which I've heard, from other some agencies, are kind of that way all the time. It can be a little bit chaotic. So
Absolutely.
I think
Absolutely.
that's a great perspective. So I want to switch a little bit to the client-facing relationship. So you had a LinkedIn post that went a bit viral, had over 1,500 engagements, quite a few reshares, and it was a post in which you detailed having to bow out of an agency pitch process pretty fairly decently down the road into the jump ball.
Yeah.
And really, what came up was this idea of IP ownership and the ownership of your ideas and fair compensation for the process of pitching. I've never paid a lot of attention to it. In my career over 13 years, have only ever been paid to pitch one time. And that was pretty shocking to me that was even a thing.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it. And we ended up winning some additional business after the fact. We used to have a process that, pardon my French, that we called mind effing, where, we would see these RFIs or these RFPs go out from media agencies, and you could tell that they weren't really, sourcing business. They were just kind of crowdsourcing ideas.
Right.
And it felt a little sketchy. But we would participate them to some degree of, wanting to put out your best foot forward and be a team player. And, there's always more of us than there are of them. So, we want to always do whatever we can. But I think, there is a boundary in which some of these processes and business models become exploitative. So be curious on your take on that situation and the idea of IP ownership and pitch for pay as a general topic as an agency leader.
Yeah. So look, we have pitched tons of times and not gotten paid for it. I mean, that's sort of, and this industry as a whole has basically shot themselves in the foot where, agencies will fall all over themselves and give away, all of the thinking and all of the smarts and all of the executions in the hope of, getting in with a client. But in this particular instance, and this is not a unique instance, but I think it comes down to knowing your value and knowing what it is that you are bringing to the party. If a creative agency, what we sell is our thinking and our creativity and our ability to execute it. So in a pitch, if they come in and they say, hey, we want, you've made it through the first round of the RFI and you've made it through a meet and greet and we want to test you with an assignment, that's fine. I mean, we'll go through and we'll participate in that. But what I don't want is, if you're not going to pay for these ideas that I'm going to share with the client, then when this process is over, if you don't select us, we retain the ownership of those ideas. Mm-hmm. It's only fair. Yeah. I'm willing to put them in front of you to show you what we can do, but I'm not willing to let you own them if we don't move forward. So in this instance, we were told that we had made it to the final four, I think, of this pitch, and that they were going to pay each agency $10,000 as to just as compensation for this presentation. So the client is shelling out $40,000 in total. Now, what they asked for was 3 complete campaigns, top to bottom, from each agency. And that at the end of that time, because they gave us $10,000, that they would own that IP. So do the math, right? $40,000 for 12 blown out campaigns.
Wow.
I mean, it's insane. So actually, it's probably more campaigns than that. But at the end of the day, how and in what universe is that fair? I mean, look, I appreciate the outreach of saying, hey, we'll compensate you for going through this process. Totally appreciate that. But then to turn around and say, but this is what you got to come with. And we had sidebar conversations with them saying, that doesn't seem right. That doesn't seem fair. I mean, even for what we've done so far, we put in more than $10,000, but I'm willing to make that investment if we have an opportunity to win the piece of business. But if I don't win the piece of business, you don't get every cake that I baked. So,
yeah, that's a good way to put it.
and in fact, we actually tried to short circuit it and say, look, here's the deal. Keep your $10,000. We'll do 3 campaigns for you and you test drive us, but just give us the assignment and we'll discount, whatever we would have spent on the pitch if you give us the piece of business and basically date instead of marry.
Mm-hmm.
But they said, no, the process has already been set. So,
Mm-hmm.
and we said, okay, well, sorry about you.
Wow.
And it was painful because we really wanted to work on the piece of business and we had a lot of really cool work that we had done. And it was a tough call, but I think at the end of the day, it was the right call. And it was the right thing to do. Because there are too many times, I think nowadays, as I said in the beginning, this industry has shot itself in the foot. And so brands are used to agencies, giving away the thinking to get the commoditized layer of work of just executing. And that's just so wrong. And I mean, think about the value of a strategy. Think about the value of a creative direction or an idea. And that's what we're just constantly giving away. When it's the other stuff that, you can put a day rate on and that's the stuff that's a lot easy to come by. But that lots of agencies are happy to play that game, and I guess it's a volume game, but we're just not going to do that. As a small agency, we don't get that many at bats, and we want to be able to make the most of the ones we do. And if we don't win one, we want to be able to take all that thinking and repurpose it in another direction should we want to.
Yeah, no, I think it's an ever expanding ebb and flow. I've heard some agencies now that won't even participate in a pitch process. And, especially when you look at that, that reality TV show about the pitch that they had out for a little bit, and the history of the pitch is, such a fascinating boiler room,
Sure.
it's a storied process.
I think it's a lot easier to say that you won't pitch. Yeah, I think it's a lot easier to say that you aren't going to pitch or participate in pitches when you've already created a substantial reputation for yourself as being a great agency.
Yeah.
Or agencies that are up and coming, or agencies that are trying to get into new categories that, I do appreciate a client's need to vet and validate and to appreciate the thinking. My feeling is more clients should be dating and handing out smaller projects to get a feel for agencies than going through a huge expensive process and putting all their eggs into one basket.
Yeah.
I mean, it just makes more sense because what you don't know through that giant process is, okay, how does the agency and the client, how do they handle conflict with one another? How do they resolve, billing issues? How are they able to pivot when hit with, news from the legal team or testing results or something like that? I think it's a lot smarter, and you're seeing this with really smart brands and CMOs and marketing leaders. You're seeing them reach out and tap smaller agencies here and there for project work. And then if that project works out and they enjoy the process, you give them more and you give them a little bit more. And that also allows, if it's a smaller agency, that allows that smaller agency to begin to scale with that brand. So you don't have the fear of swamping a boat. If there's a smaller agency that you really like to work with, but you're afraid, they're too small for us, we'll drown them. No, just start feeding them a little bit. They'll grow.
Yeah.
And you'll find out whether or not you really like working with these people, because at the end of the day, what a brand needs more than anything, because show me a brand that has, gone through a pitch process and actually used the pitch work that was in it. It almost never happens.
Good
So
point.
it's an artificial process. So you're much better off knowing that, hey, the chemistry is important. The ability to resolve conflict together is important. And the ability for an agency to sit with you and to listen and to solve problems together in the trenches. That's the most important thing, because there are lots of great agencies out there. There are lots of great creative people out there. There are a lot, with all these smaller agencies popping up, brands have more resources than ever. But, it's like finding a mate where, hey, you got to find the one that's right for you, because you might not like this one's personality, or you might not like that one's style, or whatever it is. There's one out there for everybody, but you're going to have to, you might have to kiss a few frogs just to find them.
Yeah. And I feel like there's also this agency model pendulum swing between, like, a couple of years back, it was all about the in-housing. And then a few of those, ended in catastrophe that will go unnamed. But, I'm sure you probably know the ones that I'm referring to. And then there was also, the pendulum of the specialty shop, right? Like you had an agency for AI, and you had an agency for NFTs, and you had an agency for esports, and you had a, agency for the pickleball federation, specialists for, what's the adage? Two clients are a conflict, three is a specialty, right?
Exactly. You just got to get to that third one, right?
But now the portfolio is so diverse, and the channels are so fragmented, and now there's almost so many options that we see a bit. I have at least seen a bit of a pendulum swing back to the AOR relationship, or even the holding company relationship, where they can sign one statement of work and one master services agreement and get everything under one shop.
Yeah.
But, I think there will continue to be those fashionable ebbs and flows. And as I think our next topic that I wanted to lead into will probably change the game quite dramatically, which is, we wouldn't be having an advertising podcast if we didn't talk about AI.
Sure.
But what I've heard from, a lot of the AI evangelists that I've spent time talking to is that, AI will be the great leveling field where, every shop will have the same capability from the perspective of some of the things that you talked about, which were tactical, such as, a DSP or media delivery, or being able to buy. Totally. There'll be certain things that still have those legacy relationships because of volume, but AI is definitely a great democratizer as far as delivery. But I believe that the thing that it can't do is it can't be creative. It can't be strategic. It can help you get to things faster. It's a really great research assistant.
Yeah. It can't be emotional.
No, it can't find the insight, and it can't make you feel anything, at least yet.
It's a tool. It's a great tool. And, the thing that I've always said is if average work is your wheelhouse, then you're in for a world of hurt, because AI does average really, really well. It raises the bar on it. It is a great, as you said, a great research assistant. It can do average tasks that, occupy smart people's brain spaces and takes up that space. It can take that off somebody's plate and get it done. And I think that at the end of the day, agencies that can leverage it and actually at the end of the day, I think AI can help creativity. And what I mean by that is, and I've said this in the past, so it used to be that if you were going to edit a commercial, back in my dad's day, you had a flatbed with 35 millimeter film on it that an editor literally cut and taped together. And so at the end of the day, you had a cut. Well, as a creative person, I want to see variety. I want to see variations. I want to explore options. Well, come back tomorrow we'll go through this again and we'll razor blade cut it again. Well, then computers and Avid systems came in. Well, now I can look at 10 cuts in a day. I can explore lots of different variations. I can explore different reads, different looks, different. So in that sense, it really did help creativity. Well, AI is just the next leap of that, where we can explore options. We can explore tones. We can explore writing styles. We can explore visuals. We can explore lots of things that when we were in the creating process, the making of, well, AI can take over a lot of those things now, so that now we can become editors of our own creativity. And I think that's a really interesting place to play. Think about, you know, go back to the pitch scenario. So instead of an army of studio people, you know, creating storyboards and marker comps or photo comps, well, now a couple of people can churn out a lot of AI images that get the point across, allowing the creative team to continue to think about the project and come up with more ideas. So as we look at it moving forward, certainly on the creative side, it's not going to replace what we do, at least not anytime soon. So, but we can't get sucked into this idea that whatever AI spits out is what we're going to go with, because it's going to be super average and not very good. But you've seen that, you see this in the media space where, there are companies that are just happy to bomb people with average messaging and do the volume play. Well, yeah, AI is really good at a volume play, but if you're really going to try and connect with people, that takes human insight, and that takes caring and empathy and all of those things and humor, to create something that is really going to resonate with a particular person. Other areas, I mean, we've started using it internally in new business. We've started creating our own AI tool that will mine our own RFI documents. They will help us complete RFI documents. They will help us mine our own case studies and reconfigure a case study to work especially well for a particular RFI that comes in. And that takes a lot of the doing out of the new business process, so that the really smart people that we employ can start thinking smartly about the opportunity in front of us.
Yeah, that's great. I think, when I used to work with Adobe, they would have this presentation called Sneaks at their annual show each year, the Adobe Max conference, where, they would release whatever the new software updates that were coming, down the pipeline. And inevitably you'd always have half the audience be like, oh my gosh, that's going to save me so much time. And then the other half's like, oh my gosh, that's going to take my job away.
Yeah.
But if anything, like everything that I've seen with AI is just speed in remedial tasks. Like today, after a client call, one of my clients asked me to put together a letter of intent for a partnership that we had. And, I just went in and gave ChatGPT the basic outline and said, hey, can you turn this into a letter of intent? And out it went. And then it wasn't, like you said, it wasn't done. I needed to make sure that my 3 bullet points were in there, in addition to kind of the LOI verbiage. But, I'm not an attorney, and it did a pretty nice job. And then I had it write me a sales plan not too long ago for a first year sales plan. So it's a great an outlining tool in the biz dev side. And then what I really enjoy is the conversation that I've been having with sales leaders and business development leaders about how AI will spend more time helping connect people, whether that's through social, email, text message, chat, whatever it is. It'll create those online social connections, so then we can spend more time in the real world. Whether that's on a conversation like this on a podcast, or whether it's at a conference, sitting down with somebody for a meal or a coffee. It will do a lot of the busy work in the background, allowing you to spend more time away from your computer and not be stressed out that you're missing 100 emails because you're having a lunch with somebody.
Yeah. Well, I think the key to that is, how do we use the time it frees up? And if we can use it to build relationships, build our own base of knowledge, continue to learn, or find that human connection. I think if we can use it for that, I think the industry is going to be just fine. If we use it to sort of turn on itself and use it to tear down others or whatever it is, I would not want to be in that part of the business anymore. So yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's a tool, and like any powerful tool, it's how you use it, and what you do with it. And if we can use it to be better people, to be better creatives, to be better leaders, to be, have better relationships, or whatever it is, then that's going to be okay. Certainly there are legal things that we have to worry about with regards to copywriting and copyright law. And I just, we have an AI policy within the agency that we share with our clients, and with regards to, hey, nothing goes out the door that is just purely spit out by the machine. We look at it, we put a human eye on it, we make adjustments, but at the end of the day, we need to be smart about how we use it.
Yeah, I love that. So I think now that we're coming up on the hour, I wanted to address just a cultural quote that you had in regards to just managing business, a core value proposition that you start from the perspective of what's the right thing to do, and then everything else will fall in line, whether that's, client expectations, politics, etc. I wondered if you would touch a little bit more on that. I think that would be a good place to wrap up our conversation.
Yeah, I think if you look at, for us, and for me, sort of the decision tree that happens in any particular engagement, and whether it's, should we pitch a particular client, or a client has asked us to do this, or a client is making changes to work, or what's the right thing to do with some sort of benefit that we're going to go forth. I have always believed that if you start with, all right, what's the right thing to do from a human standpoint? Or when it comes to work, what's the right thing to do for this project, creatively? I think if you start there, then at least you have a foundation to wander from if necessary. But I think level setting, and sometimes people differ on what they think the right thing to do is. So that's worth a conversation. But there have been lots of times, and sometimes, if a client's mad at us about something, we start with, all right, what's the right thing to do in this situation? Should we, simply apologize? Should we defend ourselves? Should we refund them some money? Or, there are lots of things that can take place. When you settle on what that right thing to do is, then I think you can say, okay, if that's what we know we ought to be doing, but the client's expectation, because of some politics inside here, there, and everywhere, is that we will address this, this, and this. Okay, well, let's talk about that. And let's talk about whether we should incorporate that into this, or whether we should push that aside and stick to our guns. And I think that having that mindset, for me anyway, has been very grounding when it comes to making decisions. And that way I feel like I'm not sort of chasing my tail. Well, this person said this, and this person said that, and this person wants this, and this client wants that, and whatever it is. No, at the end of the day, what are we trying to do here? And how are we going to best make it happen? If it's, an employee situation, hey, we have somebody that made a mistake. They made a bad mistake. Well, there might be a hue and cry to let that person go right away. Well, let's think about that. We're all human. What's if I were in their shoes, what would my expectations be? And then you sort of let that guide you into how you make those decisions. Same thing comes like with the incident we talked about earlier with pitching and our IP. Well, the right thing to do versus the expected thing to do. The expected thing to do was to carry on and do the pitch and all that stuff. Well, what does that say to your employees who've worked so hard on it? And what does that say to the respect that's gleaned? And so at the end of the day, we said, no, the right thing to do is to stick to our principles and decline. So that's what I meant by that. And if you start at a basis of truth or a basis of fact, a basis of humanity and a basis of humility, let's start there. And then if we need to sort of, move the course a little bit along the way because of some other thing, at least we know where we should have been. And we can't go back and say shoulda, woulda, coulda, because we made the choice to go down the path that we did. And we knew what the right thing to do was. So, that's kind of where we fall on the values and principle spectrum. It's going to be a little different for everybody. And I don't begrudge anybody the decisions or the true north that they find. But for us, that's what works for us.
I love it. Well, I think if we all spent some time like you guys did in COVID and did some introspection and figured out what those core values are, other than just doing great work and making money, I think that would be a good lesson and a good exercise for all of us to evaluate, what do our companies stand for, and what are we going to do when it gets hard and push comes to shove. So great insights, Tripp. Well, hey, I think that's a great place to wrap up. Tripp, anything else you want to promote or point people towards if they want to get in touch and reach out and get in communication with you?
Yeah, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn, Tripp Westbrook. I'm also on Twitter, same name. I guess I've been in the game way too long that I have my own name for all these things.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're interested in if any of this stuff that I talked about today is appealing to you, check out our website, firehouse.agency, and reach out.
I love it. Well, hey, for those of you who are watching at home or listening, wherever you're listening to the podcast, don't forget to subscribe so you can tune in to future episodes. And if you enjoyed the conversation that I had with Tripp today, if you were to give us a review on whatever podcast platform you are watching or listening, that helps the show find a larger audience organically. And most importantly, if there is an executive or another creative leader or a young person trying to break into our industry, and you think that they would get some value from listening to the conversation that I had with Tripp today, don't forget to share the show. And with that, we will be back shortly. Tripp, thanks so much for coming on.
Cheers. Thank you, Dylan.